investment. So let's talk about this idea that a $1 million dividend income automatically means you're rich beyond belief, driving a Lamborghini, sipping champagne, and never worrying about money again. On paper, it sounds like the ultimate dream. $1 million a year just from dividends while you're literally doing nothing. But the question is, what does that really buy you in the real world? And the answer might surprise you, because here's the thing, that number is never as clean as it looks. $1 million in dividends is not $1 million in your pocket. The government always wants its slice first. Depending on how those dividends are classified, you might be paying anywhere from 15% to 37% in taxes. That means your so-called million could instantly shrink down to somewhere between $630,000 and $80 to $50,000. And that's before we even get into state taxes if you live in a high tax state. Investment. Suddenly, it doesn't feel quite as infinite as it did when you first heard the number. Now, let's say you take home somewhere around $700,000 after taxes. That's still a lot of money, right? But lifestyle has a funny way of creeping up on people. The bigger the paycheck, the bigger the expectations. A penthouse in New York City could easily eat up a $250,000 a year in rent alone. Add in a couple of luxury cars, maybe a private school for the kids, dining out, and travel, and suddenly that $700,000 doesn't feel endless. It feels stretched. And if you're not careful, you can find yourself living paycheck to paycheck, even on dividend income that most people would consider life-changing. This is where geography completely changes the story. That same one-deb in dividend income in Manhattan or San Francisco will barely cover a high-end lifestyle, but move to a lower cost of living area, or even better, to a state with no income tax. And now you're in a position where your money buys freedom instead of just status. You could live in a beautiful house, cover every expense you could possibly think of, travel first class, and still have enough left over to reinvest. Investment. So the value of that million isn't fixed. It's entirely dependent on where you live and how you choose to live. And this brings me to the real takeaway to $1 million dividend income is not about the flashy lifestyle. It's about security, flexibility, and sustainability. The real win isn't buying Ferraris or designer clothes. It's knowing that you could stop working tomorrow and never stress about paying the bills again. It's knowing that no matter what happens in the market, you've built a financial base that will take care of you and your family for decades to come. So yes, $1 million in dividend income sounds glamorous, but what it really buys is peace of mind if you manage it correctly. And in today's world, that's worth a lot more than any supercar parked in the driveway. When people hear the phrase $1 million in dividend income, their minds immediately go to the extremes. They imagine a lifestyle of yachts, luxury cars, and never having to worry about money ever again. The truth is, the number itself can be very deceiving because while it looks massive on paper, it doesn't always translate into the kind of financial freedom people expect. $1 million in dividends sounds like you've made it to the top, but it's not as clean cut as it appears. The illusion starts with the fact that people think it means $1 million in cash they can freely spend. That's not how it works. Dividends are taxed, and depending on whether they're qualified or ordinary, the amount you actually keep varies dramatically. On the lower end, you might lose 15% of that to federal taxes, and on the higher end, closer to 37%. Add in state taxes if you live somewhere like California or New York, and suddenly your $1 million dream income could be cut down to $600 and $100. That's still an incredible amount of money, no doubt investment, but it's a far cry from the unlimited lifestyle that people tend to picture. When you hear 1M, you imagine freedom, but when you see the after-tax number, you realize it's still money that has limit. Investment. The illusion also comes from forgetting that income, no matter how high, doesn't protect against bad habits. A lot of people who chase big numbers think the number itself is the safety net. In reality, even if you're pulling in 1M a year, it's shockingly easy to overcommit. Buy a multi-million-dollar home, 2 exotic cars, enroll your kids in private schools, and suddenly you're operating on razor-thin margins again. And that's the trap. Investment. The million is enough to create a sustainable, stress-free lifestyle if managed properly, but it's not infinite wealth. It's not a blank check. That's why the number alone can create a false sense of security. You see it and assume that's the end of the journey. But if you look closer, you'll realize it's only the beginning of a much bigger responsibility. Because without discipline, the illusion of endless income can disappear faster than you think. One of the biggest misconceptions about having $1 million dividend income is believing that the entire amount is yours to enjoy. In reality, once you factor in taxes, lifestyle inflation, and the hidden costs that people often ignore, the number shrinks much faster than you'd expect. Taxes alone can make a huge dent. Even if your dividends are qualified and taxed at the lower long-term capital gains rate, you're still handing over a significant chunk to the government before that money ever hits your account. And if they're ordinary dividends, the bite is even bigger. Then, if you live in a high tax state, It's not just federal deductions you're worried about. State income tax could shave off tens of thousands more. That $1 million figure starts sliding down the scale until it looks much closer to 6 or 700,000. Then comes lifestyle creep. It's easy to assume you'd live modestly even after hitting such a financial milestone, but human nature works differently. As income rises, expectations do too. Investment. Maybe you decide to upgrade your house because you can afford it. That bigger home comes with higher property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. You tell yourself a new luxury car isn't a big deal compared to your income. But then you want another and the costs double. Dining out becomes routine, not special. Travel upgrades from economy to business class, and before you know it, investment. Your everyday expenses are running at a level where even $1 million in dividends starts to feel tight. On top of that, there are hidden costs that aren't always part of the conversation. Inflation quietly chips away at purchasing power year after year. Medical expenses, especially unexpected ones, can pile up and spiral into six-figure bills if you're not prepared. Family obligations, whether it's supporting aging parents or helping kids through college, can eat into what you thought was your income. Investment. It's not just about what you spend on yourself. It's about the responsibilities that come along with financial success. This is why $1 million in dividends isn't the open-ended luxury it seems to be from the outside. Without careful planning, taxes, lifestyle creep, and hidden costs can transform what sounds like financial abundance into something much more ordinary. Where you live has more impact on your finances than most people realize. And that becomes crystal clear when you look at what $1 million dividend income actually buys. In some parts of the country, that kind of money makes you feel like you're living on top of the world. In other places, it might only cover what feels like a fairly average lifestyle. $1 million sounds like a fixed number, but its real value is completely tied to geography and cost of living. Take somewhere like New York City or San Francisco. The cost of housing alone can eat up an enormous portion of your after-tax dividend income. Renting a high-end apartment could easily run $20,000 a month, which is nearly $250,000 a year just to keep a roof over your head. Add on dining out, commuting, parking, and simply existing in a high-cost city, and suddenly your million doesn't stretch very far. In these environments, it's easy to feel like you're constantly keeping up, never really ahead, even though your income is something most people can only dream about. Now compare that to a state like Texas or Florida, where there's no state income tax and the cost of housing is far lower. $1 million in dividends here could cover a spacious home, all of your living expenses, luxury travel, and still leave you with a significant cushion to reinvest. The difference isn't the income, it's the environment. Investment, your dollars work harder, and that creates more freedom. This is why two people earning the exact same amount can live lives that look completely different, simply based on where they decide to plant themselves. There's also the option of going even further and moving internationally. In some countries, the cost of living is so low compared to the US that your money could provide a lifestyle you'd never dream of back home. Private healthcare, household staff, regular vacations, and still plenty left to save. The downside, of course, is being away from family, friends, and familiar systems, but the point remains the same. Geography defines purchasing power. So while $1 million dividend income is impressive no matter how you look at it, the quality of life it actually buys almost entirely on the zip code you choose. The real power of $1 million dividend income isn't in how flashy you can make your lifestyle look, but in how sustainable you can make your wealth over the long run. Too many people get caught up in the idea that once you hit that number, and you should be living in a mansion, driving a supercar, and posting pictures of luxury vacations every month. But the truth is that kind of spending almost always leads to financial stress, even at this level of income. What separates people who stay wealthy from those who eventually run into trouble is the ability to resist the temptation of lifestyle inflation and focus instead on building a foundation that lasts. Sustainable wealth comes from treating that dividend income not as an endless stream, but as a resource that needs to be respected. That means keeping expenses well below your means, reinvesting a portion of what comes in, and preparing for the unexpected. The flashy purchases might feel exciting in the short term, but they don't compound. What compounds is reinvested income, smart allocation, and the discipline to keep your financial base growing year after year. When you're consistently reinvesting, your dividend income has the potential to keep increasing, which is the key to not just maintaining wealth, but expanding it. There's also the mental side of it. Living sustainably creates peace of mind. Knowing that you could cover every bill without breaking a sweat, knowing you have a safety net for emergencies, and knowing your wealth is still growing in the background. Those things matter more than driving the newest sports car. Investment. That sense of control is what real financial freedom looks like. It's not about showing off. It's about creating options and flexibility. It's about being able to choose how you spend your time, not just how you spend your money. When you focus on sustainability, $1 million dividend income stops being just a number and becomes a tool for building the kind of life most people only dream about. And that's the difference between simply having money and truly having freedom.